Imagine being the undisputed best in the world at what you do.
Wait, like the absolute peak.
Exactly. Not just great, but the unquestioned peak of your profession. You're in your physical prime, shattering records left and right. And then you just walk away
You just quit.
over a scheduling conflict, like to shoot a movie.
It sounds totally absurd when you frame it like that. I mean, it sounds almost like career sabotage.
Yeah, it really does.
But that is exactly what Jim Brown did at age 30. Right off the back of an MVP season, simply because a team owner threatened to fine him.
It is such an incredible moment, and it honestly sets the stage perfectly for what we're unpacking today. Welcome to our deep dive into the life of Jim Brown.
And if you're listening to this, that name is probably synonymous with football greatness for you.
Oh, absolutely. He's widely considered, one of the most dominant running backs in the history of the NFL. But his life is this sprawling, intensely complex American story.
It really is.
We're tracing the journey of a guy who was a multi-sport prodigy, an NFL titan, a pioneering Black action star, a frontline civil rights activist, and we have to get into this, a deeply controversial, violently flawed figure off the field.
Right, because that sudden retirement in London, it isn't just some quirky footnote in sports history.
No, not at all.
It's actually the defining mechanism of Jim Brown's entire life. I mean, this was a man who possessed this, pathological refusal to let anyone else dictate his worth, or his boundaries, or his timeline.
Nobody was going to tell him what to do.
Exactly. And once you understand that operating principle, every other phase of his life, the triumphs, the profound transgressions, it all starts to make structural sense.
Well, so let's look at how that operating principle was forged. Because before he could dominate the pros, Brown had to force his way into a system that was, quite frankly, engineered to keep him out.
Yeah, the early years are crucial here.
Right. So he was born on St. Simon's Island, Georgia, and raised by his grandmother. And that early environment was really important. It was this insular community where he was shielded from the direct daily humiliations of the Jim Crow South.
Which is huge for a kid's development in that era.
Totally. It allowed him to build this very deep, unshakable sense of self-reliance. But then at age 8, he moves to Manhasset, New York, because his mother was working there as a domestic.
And that move is where he abruptly collides with systemic barriers. But, it's also where his athletic mythology really begins.
Oh, the high school stats are insane.
Yeah, at Manhasset High School, he didn't just play sports. He fundamentally overwhelmed them. We were talking about 13 letters across 5 different sports.
Football, basketball, baseball, lacrosse, and track, right?
Yep. He even threw 2 no-hitters in baseball. His physical metrics and hand-eye coordination were so elite that the New York Yankees scouted him. They actually offered him a minor league contract.
And he turned the Yankees down.
He really did.
Think about the calculation there. He plays some first base and pitches in the spring just to, test his own limits. Realizes the baseball minor league system is this slow, controlled grind that wouldn't get him to the majors fast enough. So he just politely sends his regrets to Casey Stengel.
He wanted a more immediate path to dominance.
Exactly. Which took him to Syracuse University. But, just getting into Syracuse was an arduous battle.
Oh, it was a massive fight. A local benefactor, a lawyer and former Syracuse lacrosse star named Kenneth Malloy, literally had to force the university's hand to admit Brown.
Because of the quotas.
Right. Syracuse essentially operated under an unwritten quota system. And according to Malloy, they frankly just did not want Black athletes disrupting their culture.
Wow.
Yeah. During his freshman year, Brown was the only African-American player on the entire football squad.
Only one.
The administration even reneged on their promise of a full scholarship for the second half of his freshman year. So Malloy had to personally fundraise to keep Brown in school.
And the mechanics of the racism he faced there, it was both structural and just, incredibly petty.
Yeah, they housed him in a non-athlete dormitory just to isolate him.
And the administration explicitly called him in to warn him against dating Caucasian women.
It's unbelievable. And on the field, the coaching staff went out of their way to hide him.
Right, they tried to switch him to punter or lineman or wide receiver because the running back is the face of the offense, right? Yeah. The star of the show. And a Black man in that spotlight in the mid-1950s was just unacceptable to the Syracuse brass.
But the thing is, you cannot suppress a statistical anomaly.
You really can't.
By his senior year, his sheer production forced them to play him at running back. He became a consensus first-team All-American and finished 5th in the Heisman Trophy voting.
Okay, we have to talk about that regular season finale against Colgate.
Oh, the 61-7 game.
Yes. Brown rushed for 197 yards, scored 6 touchdowns, and then this is the best part. He took on the kicking duties and booted 7 extra points himself.
Just doing everything.
He set an NCAA record of 43 points in a single game. It was just this undeniable imposition of his will.
And yet, a lot of sports historians argue he was actually just as dominant at lacrosse, if not better.
Okay, let's unpack this because the lacrosse stuff is wild.
It really is. In his senior year, he tied for first in national scoring with 43 goals in 10 games.
But the actual physics of his lacrosse game, I mean, this is what blew my mind in our sources. The primary weapon for a lacrosse defender is the stick check, right? Like knocking the ball out of the opponent's netting.
Right, but Brown had this technique where he would catch the ball and immediately pin his stick flat against his chest.
And try stick checking a 220-pound wall of muscle sprinting at full speed. You physically cannot reach the stick.
He was so impossible to strip that the governing body of the sport literally had to change the rule book.
Wait, they actually changed the rules?
Yeah, they started requiring players to keep their sticks in constant motion.
It's like when the NBA had to widen the paint rules specifically because Wilt Chamberlain was physically overwhelming everyone near the basket.
Exactly. It's the ultimate testament to an athlete's physical reality just rendering a sport's existing framework obsolete. When a player breaks the physics of your game, you have to rewrite the laws to restore balance.
You literally have to legislate against their genetics.
And that genetic dominance, I mean, it translated flawlessly to the professional level.
Totally. So in 1957, the Cleveland Browns draft him in the first round. And interestingly, the NBA's Syracuse Nationals also drafted him in the 9th round, just in case.
Just as a backup plan.
Right. But he chooses the NFL and embarks on what is arguably the most dominant career in the history of the sport.
Unquestionably. I mean, in his 1957 rookie season, he wins Rookie of the Year and the NFL MVP award.
Both of them.
Both. To this day, he is the only player in NFL history to achieve that dual honor in the same season.
That's incredible.
Over a 9-year career, he averaged 5.2 yards per carry and 104.3 rushing yards per game. He remains the only player in history to average over 100 rushing yards per game for an entire career.
See, the statistic that always stops me dead is the durability. We are talking about a running back in the 1950s and 60s. This is an era of brutal, unprotected collisions.
And he played 118 games over 9 seasons and never missed a single start. Not one.
How does a human body absorb that kind of trauma without breaking down?
Well, it comes down to his biomechanics, sure, but more importantly, it was his psychological approach to physical punishment. He viewed endurance as a weapon.
Like a mental game.
Exactly. Hall of Fame tight end John Mackey noted this specific philosophy Brown shared with him. Brown said, "Make sure when anyone tackles you, he remembers how much it hurts."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Brown wasn't absorbing hits, he was delivering them. He flipped the psychological dynamic of being tackled.
Which brings up a fascinating physiological contradiction that we found in the sources. During games, Brown adamantly refused to drink water.
Yeah, this is a crazy detail.
He believed that drinking water would make him feel satisfied. And he felt satisfied. He would lose his internal aggression and drive.
Which functionally makes zero sense.
Right. As an elite athlete burning thousands of calories in heavy gear, dehydration actively destroys your muscle elasticity. It causes severe cramping. It degrades cognitive reaction times. Was this just a sheer placebo effect, or was he literally risking organ failure just to feel angry on the field?
Physiologically, it was undoubtedly detrimental. But psychologically, it speaks to this concept of manufactured adversity.
He needed the struggle.
Exactly. Jim Brown could not function in a state of equilibrium. He needed friction. If there wasn't a structural barrier in front of him, he would invent a physical one like severe thirst, just to keep himself in a state of heightened combative alertness.
He really believed his greatness was inextricably linked to his discomfort.
Yes. And that absolute need for control, that refusal to seek comfort, it perfectly explains his exit from the game.
So let's get into the exit. It is 1966. He's 30 years old, coming off his 3rd NFL MVP season. He holds the all-time records for rushing yards and total touchdowns. And he's in London shooting the World War II film The Dirty Dozen.
Right. He was cast as Robert Jefferson, one of the convicts sent on an assassination mission. But due to torrential rain in England, the production schedule gets heavily delayed.
Which means Brown is going to miss the start of the Cleveland Browns training camp.
Yep. So Art Model, the owner of the Browns, decides to play hardball. He wants to assert dominance over his star player, so he threatens to fine Brown $1,500 for every week of camp he misses.
And in 1966, that is a substantial amount of money.
Huge amount. But Modell completely misunderstood the psychology of the man he was threatening.
Yeah, you don't threaten Jim Brown.
Confronted with an ultimatum from an owner trying to establish a hierarchy, Brown didn't negotiate. He certainly didn't plead. He just called a press conference and announced his retirement from professional football.
Just like that. The leverage shift was instantaneous. Modell thought he was disciplining an employee, and Brown just reminded him that he was an autonomous enterprise.
Exactly. The same uncompromising nature that drove him to punish tacklers on the field allowed him to effortlessly walk away from the sport when someone tried to leash him.
So he trades his cleats for Hollywood. And this is where his cultural footprint really explodes. Because he didn't just pivot to acting, right? He bulldozed the racial parameters of 1960s cinema.
He really did. He wasn't taking background roles. Through films like Ice Station Zebra and Riot, he essentially forged the archetype of the black action star.
Critics at the time were calling him a black Superman or a black John Wayne.
He was a leading man who exuded unapologetic power and sexuality on screen, which was incredibly transgressive for that era.
And the apex of that transgression happens in 1969 with a film called 100 Rifles. He stars alongside Raquel Welch, and they share a love scene that literally makes cinematic history.
Yeah, it's recognized as one of the very first interracial love scenes in a major Hollywood studio film.
And Brown knew his worth. He secured top billing over his co-stars, commanded a $200,000 salary, and demanded 5% of the box office. He was forcefully expanding the economic and visual boundaries for black actors.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, he wasn't just leveraging his fame for personal wealth. He was applying that exact same economic philosophy to the civil rights movement.
Right, so in 1967, he organizes what becomes known as the Cleveland Summit.
This is a huge moment. Muhammad Ali had just refused induction into the U.S. military draft for the Vietnam War, citing his religious beliefs.
And Ali was immediately stripped of his heavyweight title, his boxing license, and was facing 5 years in federal prison. He was arguably the most vilified man in mainstream American society at that specific moment. Standing next to him was professional suicide.
Which is exactly what makes the Cleveland Summit so historically massive. Jim Brown gathered towering black athletes. We're talking Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to meet with Ali.
And they questioned him deeply about his religious convictions.
They did. And then, crucially, they held a press conference to publicly declare their solidarity with him.
For Brown to leverage his cultural capital to shield Ali was just an act of profound bravery. They were risking their endorsements, their public standing, their careers to support a man the federal government was actively trying to destroy.
And Brown's overarching approach to activism was incredibly pragmatic. He wasn't really interested in just marching. He believed that marches asked the establishment for rights, whereas capital forces the establishment to yield.
So he founds the Negro Industrial Economic Union, which later becomes the Black Economic Union. And the entire mechanism of this organization was to secure loans and promote commercial enterprises for minority-owned businesses.
It was a strict philosophy of black capitalism. He believed economic independence was the only true path to liberation. And, we have to look objectively at how that specific focus scrambled traditional partisan expectations.
Right, because we're just reporting what the sources say here. We're not taking sides.
Exactly. Because he prioritized economic leverage above all else, Brown actually endorsed Richard Nixon in the 1968 presidential election.
Which shocks a lot of people today.
Yeah. But Nixon's campaign had explicitly promised to support minority business initiatives. And Brown views that as a more tangible mechanism for progress than the social programs offered by the left.
It was purely transactional. And that pragmatic approach to community leverage continued for decades. In 1988, he founded the AmeriCAN program, which was designed to teach life management skills to at-risk youth and gang members.
And this wasn't just some vanity charity project.
No. Through this foundation, Brown was instrumental in establishing the historic 1992 Watts gang truce in Los Angeles.
I mean, think about the mechanics of how that truce was negotiated. Brown hosted rival leaders from the Bloods and Crips in the living room of his own home.
In his house.
Yeah. He commanded their respect not because he was an athlete, but because he possessed this untouchable cultural authority. He was an uncompromising black man who understood violence and had fought the systemic power structures of America.
He leveraged that immense credibility to get warring factions to sit down and discuss economic survival instead of mutual destruction.
But naturally, this level of influence made him a massive target for the establishment. Declassified files reveal that the FBI, the Secret Service, and various police departments were heavily monitoring him.
They attempted to smear his economic groups as radical extremist fronts, just looking for any angle to neutralize his influence.
Which brings us to the most difficult, fractured aspect of his legacy.
Yeah, we have to pivot here.
Because while the FBI struggled to invent reasons to take him down, Brown was generating profoundly destructive behavior in his private life. The same uncompromising aggression that fueled his greatness on the field and his fearlessness in activism, well, it manifested as extreme violence behind closed doors.
It's a stark, uncomfortable reality that we really have to examine. Over his adult life, Jim Brown was arrested at least 7 times for assault, overwhelmingly directed at women. In 1968, a highly publicized incident occurred where a model named Eva Bonchin was found beneath the balcony of his second-floor apartment. Brown was charged with assault with intent to commit murder.
He later claimed in his autobiography that it was merely a misunderstanding stemming from an argument over an alleged affair with Gloria Steinem. The charges were eventually dismissed because Bonchin refused to cooperate with prosecutors.
But we have to analyze the systemic mechanics of the era here.
Absolutely. In the 1960s and 70s, the justice system and the PR machinery surrounding powerful, famous men were designed to protect the asset. When a sports icon was investigated, victims faced immense intimidation, and prosecutors rarely pursued cases without perfect cooperative witnesses.
But the violence didn't stop in the 60s. Decades later, in 1999, he was arrested for making terroristic threats against his wife, Monique, and he was convicted of vandalism for taking a shovel and smashing her car.
Smashed your car with a shovel.
The judge handed down a sentence of probation, community service, and mandatory domestic violence counseling. But Brown's pathological refusal to be told what to do kicked in.
He completely ignored the terms of his probation.
He explicitly told the court he would rather sit in a jail cell than be forced to attend therapy. And in 2002, the court obliged, sentencing him to 6 months in jail, of which he served 3.
He literally chose incarceration over psychological self-examination. And the allegations continued to surface long after. The 2022 documentary series Secrets of Playboy detailed accounts from multiple women who alleged Brown violently assaulted and raped them at the Playboy Mansion over a period spanning the late 70s into the 90s.
Now, later in life, around 2015, he made public statements condemning violence, saying, "There is never a justification for anyone to impose themselves on someone else. Do not put your hands on a woman." But when you study a historical figure with this level of behavioral dissonance, it raises deep questions for all of us about how society processes legacy. You have a hero who risked his freedom for civil rights, who brokered peace between heavily armed street gangs, and simultaneously you have a man who repeatedly terrorized women and violently refused accountability. How do you reconcile that?
Honestly, it forces us to abandon the idea of moral purity in our historical figures. The human capacity to compartmentalize great civic virtue and profound interpersonal cruelty within the exact same mind is unsettling, but it is a reality.
It's the friction of history.
Exactly. Acknowledging his history of abuse does not erase the systemic barriers he dismantled, and acknowledging his monumental cultural courage does not absolve his violence. Both truths exist simultaneously in total friction with one another.
And when he passed away in 2023 at the age of 87, you saw that friction in the tributes. They were massive and unprecedented. Barack Obama honored him for pushing other black athletes to speak out. ESPN had previously named him the 4th greatest athlete of the 20th century. His shadow is just inescapable.
And, he never lost that underlying ferocious pride. There is this incredible anecdote from 1984 that really captures it.
Oh, I love this story.
So Pittsburgh Steelers running back Franco Harris is closing in on Brown's all-time rushing record. And Brown publicly despises how Harris plays, criticizing him for running out of bounds to avoid tackles, which is the exact opposite of Brown's punishing philosophy.
Right. So what does Brown do? In 1985, at 48 years old, he challenges the 34-year-old active player, Franco Harris, to a nationally televised 40-yard dash.
He literally steps onto a track to prove his genetic supremacy against a man 14 years younger.
Brown ends up losing, clocking a 5.72 to Harris's 5.16, and pulls his hamstring at the finish line. But the sheer audacity to line up and run that race in front of the world, that is the essence of Jim Brown. Just this unwavering belief in his own physical dominance.
He was a man entirely constructed out of his own mythology.
Which leaves you with a really fascinating structural question about the intersection of greatness and era. Jim Brown operated in a time when the media landscape allowed a man to tightly compartmentalize his public heroism and his private transgressions. The silos of the 1960s and 70s protected the overarching narrative of the superstar.
Yeah, that's a really sharp point.
So if a figure with Jim Brown's generational reality-bending talent and his exact same pattern of behavioral violence arrived in the NFL today, the mechanics of fame would be entirely different.
Completely different.
In an era of 247 digital scrutiny, instantaneous information, and shifting cultural accountability, would his undeniable historic greatness on the field shield him from consequence? Or would his actions behind closed doors have dismantled his career before he ever had the chance to walk away on his own terms?
It really makes you wonder how much of an icon's legacy is forged by the sheer force of their will, and how much is quietly subsidized by the specific silence of the times they lived in.
A great thought to end on for today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll see you on the next one.